The parchment cracked under Dr. Elena Marchetti's careful fingers as she lifted it from the climate-controlled archive box. After 3 decades of studying medieval and Renaissance natural histories, she thought she had seen every variation of fantastical beast that had captured the imagination of early naturalists. But this manuscript, recently discovered in a sealed chamber beneath the University of Bologna's oldest library, contained creatures unlike anything in the established bestiary tradition. The manuscript bore the unmistakable hand of Ulysses Aldrovandi, the legendary 16th-century naturalist whose comprehensive studies of the natural world had earned him recognition as one of the fathers of modern natural history. Yet this work was different from his published volumes. Where Aldrovandi's known bestiaries contained meticulous illustrations of both real animals and the fantastic creatures of medieval tradition, griffins, unicorns, dragons, this hidden manuscript depicted beings that seemed to exist in some impossible middle ground between reality and imagination. Elena adjusted her magnifying glass and examined the first illustration more closely. The creature appeared to be some sort of hybrid between a large cat and a bird, but with anatomical features that defied conventional understanding. Its skeletal structure showed adaptations that would theoretically allow for both quadrupedal terrestrial movement and aerial flight, yet the musculature depicted suggested neither function would be performed efficiently. Most intriguingly, Aldrovandi had included detailed behavioral observations written in his characteristic Latin, describing hunting patterns, mating rituals, and social structures as if he had observed these creatures firsthand. The marginalia throughout the manuscript contained references to locations that Elena could not immediately identify. Aldrovandi wrote of expeditions to the hidden valleys beyond the Apennines and the sealed chambers beneath the monastery of San Vitale, locations that seemed to exist outside the geographical knowledge of his time. More puzzling still were his repeated references to the custodians and their sacred duty to preserve what must not be known. As Elena progressed through the manuscript, the creatures became increasingly extraordinary. One appeared to be a serpentine entity with crystalline scales that Aldrovandi claimed could manipulate light itself, creating illusions that could deceive even the most learned observer. Another resembled a massive arthropod with humanoid intelligence, depicted engaged in what appeared to be written communication with human figures. The anatomical precision of these illustrations rivaled Aldrovandi's most detailed work on known species, complete with dissection diagrams and careful notation of organ systems. The mystery deepened when Elena discovered that several pages had been deliberately removed from the manuscript. The cuts were clean and purposeful, made with a sharp blade along the binding. In the remaining page fragments, she could make out portions of text that seemed to describe not just the creatures themselves, but methods for their containment and management. There were references to feeding schedules and breeding protocols, suggesting these were not merely observed specimens, but actively maintained populations. Elena's research into the manuscript's provenance revealed that it had been sealed away in 1598, just 3 years after Aldrovandi's death. The sealing had been ordered by Cardinal Alessandro de' Medici, who had also issued a papal bull declaring the contents dangerous to the natural order and the souls of Christian men. The cardinal's private correspondence, preserved in the Vatican secret archives, contained cryptic references to abominations that mock God's creation and the necessity of ensuring such knowledge never again poisoned the minds of the faithful. The more Elena studied the manuscript, the more convinced she became that Aldrovandi had documented real creatures, not imaginative fancy. The level of detail in his anatomical drawings, the specificity of his behavioral observations, and the practical tone of his notes on care and maintenance all suggested direct experience rather than speculation. Yet if these creatures had existed, what had happened to them? Her investigation led her to examine contemporary records from religious institutions throughout northern Italy. In monastery chronicles and church registries, she began to find oblique references to the cleansing that had taken place in the final years of the 16th century. Multiple sources describe the organized destruction of unholy specimens that had been gathered for study by those who would transgress against divine will. The language was consistently vague, but the timing aligned perfectly with the sealing of Aldrovandi's manuscript. The breakthrough came when Elena discovered a cache of letters exchanged between Cardinal de' Medici and various monastery abbots. The correspondence revealed the existence of a systematic campaign to locate and destroy what they termed the aberrant collections. These letters described expeditions to remote locations, the discovery of hidden facilities containing creatures of impossible nature, and their subsequent destruction by fire. The cardinal's final letter on the subject, dated December 1598, declared the campaign successful and ordered all records of it to be destroyed. Elena realized she was looking at evidence of what might have been history's first systematic extermination of species based on religious ideology. Aldrovandi's manuscript represented not just a catalog of unknown creatures, but documentation of a lost branch of natural history that had been deliberately erased from human knowledge. The precision of his illustrations and the practical nature of his observations suggested that these creatures had been kept in captivity, possibly bred and studied over extended periods. The implications were staggering. If Aldrovandi had indeed maintained living populations of these extraordinary creatures, it suggested a level of biological diversity in the late Renaissance that far exceeded current understanding. The anatomical features depicted in his drawings showed evolutionary adaptations that defied conventional taxonomy, hinting at biological processes and genetic possibilities that modern science was only beginning to comprehend. Elena's analysis of the manuscript's physical composition provided additional clues. The parchment contained traces of unusual organic compounds that didn't match any known medieval preparation methods. Spectroscopic analysis revealed the presence of proteins and amino acids in configurations that suggested contact with unknown biological material. The ink itself contained pigments that appeared to be derived from sources not documented in any contemporary accounts of artistic materials. The botanical illustrations scattered throughout the manuscript presented another puzzle. Aldrovandi had depicted various plants and fungi alongside his creature studies, noting their use as sustenance for the maintained specimens. These botanical drawings showed the same meticulous attention to detail as his zoological work, but depicted species that couldn't be matched to any known flora. The root systems, leaf structures, and reproductive mechanisms all showed adaptations that seemed to exist outside conventional botanical understanding. Elena's examination of the manuscript's binding revealed hidden compartments containing additional materials. Small vials of crystallized substances were embedded within the cover's wooden backing, along with pressed specimens of plant material that had somehow remained preserved for over 4 centuries. Chemical analysis of these materials revealed molecular structures that challenged current biochemical knowledge, with protein folding patterns and chemical bonds that shouldn't have been stable under natural conditions. The most significant discovery came when Elena found a coded section of text hidden within what appeared to be decorative marginalia. Using cryptographic techniques from Aldrovandi's era, she decoded passages that described not just the creatures themselves, but the circumstances of their collection and study. Aldrovandi wrote of contracts with the custodians and agreements for the temporary housing of their charges. He described these beings not as wild animals captured for study, but as entities under some form of protective custody. The decoded text revealed that Aldrovandi believed these creatures to be survivors from what he termed the previous ordering of the world. His notes suggested they possessed intelligence levels that varied dramatically between species, with some showing clear signs of advanced reasoning and communication abilities. He described elaborate social structures, technological capabilities that seemed to transcend their apparent biological limitations, and what appear to be active attempts to conceal their existence from human observation. Elena's research into contemporary accounts of Aldrovandi's later years revealed a marked change in his behavior following his acquisition of these specimens. Colleagues described him becoming increasingly secretive and withdrawn, abandoning his public lectures, and refusing to discuss his current research. His published works from this period showed a notable decline in the fantastical elements that had characterized his earlier bestiaries, as if his encounters with genuinely extraordinary creatures had made conventional mythological beasts seem trivial by comparison. The manuscript contained detailed architectural plans for what Aldrovandi called appropriate housing facilities. These designs showed sophisticated environmental controls, specialized feeding systems, and security measures that seemed remarkably advanced for the period. The plans included provisions for different atmospheric compositions, temperature variations, and even what appeared to be electromagnetic shielding. The level of technical detail suggested that Aldrovandi had received guidance from individuals with knowledge far exceeding conventional Renaissance engineering capabilities. Elena discovered that similar facilities had been constructed at several locations throughout northern Italy during the late 16th century. Property records and construction accounts revealed the building of unusual underground complexes beneath established monasteries and universities. These projects had been funded through discretionary accounts that couldn't be traced to any official sources, and the workers involved had been sworn to secrecy under penalty of excommunication. The systematic destruction of these facilities in 1598 had been thorough and deliberate. Archaeological evidence from several sites showed signs of intense fires that had burned hot enough to melt stone and metal. The destruction had been followed by the construction of conventional buildings over the sites, effectively erasing all surface evidence of the original structures. Only the manuscript had survived, hidden away by someone who had recognized its irreplaceable value. Elena's analysis of the creature illustrations revealed anatomical features that suggested adaptation to environments unlike any found on Earth's surface. Respiratory systems designed for atmospheric compositions with higher concentrations of noble gases, skeletal structures adapted for different gravitational conditions, and sensory organs configured to detect electromagnetic frequencies outside the normal spectrum of terrestrial life. These adaptations implied either evolution under radically different environmental conditions or biological engineering capabilities far beyond Renaissance understanding. The behavioral observations recorded in the manuscript described social structures and communication methods that challenged conventional understanding of animal intelligence. Aldrovandi documented complex linguistic exchanges between different species, collaborative problem-solving behaviors, and what appeared to be technological manufacturing capabilities. His notes described creatures that could manipulate matter at the molecular level, creating tools and structures from raw materials through processes that resembled advanced nanotechnology more than biological function. The manuscript's final entries, written in Aldrovandi's increasingly shaky hand, revealed his growing awareness that his research was being monitored and that the creatures under his protection faced imminent danger. He wrote of receiving warnings from the custodians that the time of concealment was ending and that the sacred trust would soon be broken. His final notes described his desperate attempts to create a complete record before they come to erase what should not be forgotten. Elena realized that Aldrovandi's manuscript represented more than just a catalog of unknown species. It was evidence of a complex relationship between human and non-human intelligences that had been deliberately erased from historical memory. The systematic destruction of the creatures and their documentation suggested a coordinated effort to maintain humanity's perception of its place in the natural order, eliminating evidence of biological diversity and intelligence that challenged anthropocentric assumptions about the nature of life on Earth. The implications of Elena's discovery extended far beyond historical curiosity. If Aldrovandi's documentation was accurate, it suggested that the Renaissance period had witnessed direct contact with forms of life that possessed capabilities far exceeding human understanding. The deliberate suppression of this knowledge represented not just scientific censorship, but the active concealment of information that could have fundamentally altered the trajectory of human development. Elena's attempts to publish her findings met with unexpected resistance from academic institutions and religious authorities. Her initial papers were rejected by established journals without review, and her research funding was quietly discontinued. Colleagues began distancing themselves from her work, citing concerns about the speculative nature of her conclusions despite the overwhelming physical evidence she had compiled. The manuscript itself became the subject of competing claims from various institutions and government agencies. The Vatican issued a formal request for its return, citing its status as ecclesiastical property, while UNESCO declared it a protected cultural artifact requiring international oversight. Elena found herself at the center of a legal and political controversy that seemed disproportionate to the academic significance of a historical document. As Elena continued her research despite institutional opposition, she began to uncover evidence that Aldrovandis' custodians might not have been entirely eliminated in the 16th century purge. Scattered references in more recent historical documents suggested the continued existence of groups dedicated to preserving and protecting knowledge deemed too dangerous for general dissemination. These modern custodians appear to operate through a network of academic institutions, government agencies, and private foundations, maintaining careful control over information that could challenge established understanding of natural history. The realization that forces actively working to suppress her research might represent a continuation of the same institutional authorities that had destroyed Aldrovandi specimens added a contemporary dimension to Elena's historical investigation. The manuscript was not merely a window into the past, but evidence of ongoing efforts to control human understanding of biological diversity and planetary history. Elena's final analysis of the manuscript revealed its true purpose as more than just a scientific catalog. Aldrovandi had created a comprehensive guide for recognizing and understanding forms of life that existed outside conventional biological categories. His detailed observations and careful documentation represented a blueprint for re-establishing contact with intelligences that had chosen concealment over confrontation, survival over disclosure. The manuscript's survival through 4 centuries of deliberate suppression suggested that its creation had been part of a larger strategy to preserve essential knowledge through periods of institutional hostility. Aldrovandi's careful hiding of the document, combined with the cryptographic protection of its most sensitive information, indicated awareness that future generations might be better equipped to understand and protect the extraordinary diversity of life his research had documented. Elena understood that her discovery placed her in a position similar to Aldrovandi's own dilemmas centuries earlier. The knowledge contained in the manuscript represented both an unprecedented opportunity for advancing human understanding and a potential threat to the stability of established institutions and belief systems. The systematic suppression of her research suggested that the same forces that had destroyed Aldrovandi's specimens remained active and vigilant against the disclosure of information they considered dangerous to social order. The manuscript stood as testament to the existence of biological wonders that had once shared the earth with humanity, creatures whose extraordinary capabilities and intelligence have been deemed too threatening to acknowledge. Their deliberate destruction represented not just the extinction of unique species, but the elimination of possibilities for understanding life itself in fundamentally different ways. Aldrovandi's careful documentation ensured that knowledge of their existence would survive, waiting for a time when humanity might be ready to acknowledge the true complexity and wonder of the biological world they had inherited. Elena's work with the manuscript ultimately revealed that the boundaries between natural history and institutional control had always been more permeable than academic tradition acknowledged. The systematic suppression of Aldrovandi's research demonstrated how scientific knowledge could be shaped and limited by forces operating outside the conventional scope of scholarly inquiry. The creatures documented in his hidden manuscript represented not just lost biological diversity, but lost possibilities for understanding the relationship between intelligence, consciousness, and the fundamental nature of life itself. The legacy of Aldrovandi's final manuscript extended beyond its historical significance to challenge contemporary assumptions about the completeness of scientific knowledge and the neutrality of academic institutions. Elena realized that her discovery was both an ending and a beginning, the conclusion of a centuries-old mystery and the opening of new questions about what other knowledge might remain hidden, waiting for researchers willing to challenge established boundaries and risk institutional opposition in pursuit of truth. The manuscript's survival ensured that the memory of these remarkable creatures would persist, even if the creatures themselves had been lost to deliberate destruction. Aldrovandi's careful documentation provided hope that understanding their nature and capabilities might eventually contribute to expanding human knowledge of biological possibilities, consciousness, and the true diversity of life that had once flourished beyond the narrow confines of officially acknowledged natural history. Elena's investigation had revealed that the destruction of Aldrovandi's specimens represented more than just the elimination of unknown species. It had been part of a broader effort to maintain control over human understanding of their place in the natural world. The systematic suppression of evidence for biological intelligence and capabilities beyond conventional parameters suggested ongoing institutional commitment to preserving established hierarchies of knowledge and authority, even at the cost of scientific advancement and expanded understanding of life's true potential. The preservation of Aldrovandi's manuscript through 4 centuries of systematic suppression had required more than mere chance. As Elena delved deeper into the document's hidden history, she uncovered evidence of a sophisticated network that had protected the knowledge through generations of political upheaval, religious persecution, and institutional transformation. The manuscript had passed through the hands of scholars, monks, and collectors who understood its significance and were willing to risk their lives to preserve it. Elena discovered that the manuscript's journey through history had been carefully orchestrated by what appeared to be a continuation of Aldrovandi's original custodians. These protectors had operated through secret societies, underground academic networks, and carefully positioned individuals within religious and educational institutions. Their methods had evolved with each era, adapting to changing political climates while maintaining their core mission of preserving dangerous knowledge for future generations who might be better equipped to understand and utilize it. The cryptographic elements embedded throughout the manuscript revealed multiple layers of protection that had been added over the centuries. Each generation of guardians had contributed additional codes, hidden messages, and protective enchantments that served both to conceal sensitive information from casual observers and to authenticate the document for legitimate researchers. Elena realized that her ability to decode these layers marked her as more than just an accidental discoverer. She had been selected, tested, and gradually guided toward this moment of revelation. Her investigation into the modern institutional response to her research revealed the continuation of the same systematic suppression that had destroyed Aldrovandi specimens. Government agencies, academic institutions, and religious authorities appear to be coordinating their efforts to discredit her work and prevent public disclosure of the manuscript's contents. The sophistication of their response suggested advanced preparation, as if protocols had been established centuries earlier for handling exactly this type of discovery. Elena's analysis of contemporary biological research revealed disturbing parallels to the patterns documented in Aldrovandi's manuscript. Reports of unusual discoveries were being systematically suppressed. Researchers investigating anomalous phenomena were losing funding and institutional support, and specimens that challenged conventional understanding were disappearing from laboratory collections. The modern scientific community appeared to be subject to the same type of institutional control that had operated during the Renaissance, though with more sophisticated methods and broader reach. The technological analysis of the manuscript's physical components yielded increasingly extraordinary results. The organic compounds embedded in the parchment contained molecular structures that shouldn't have been stable for more than a few decades. Yet spectroscopic dating confirmed the document's age at over 400 years. The preservation techniques used went beyond anything documented in historical records, suggesting the application of knowledge and capabilities that exceeded conventional Renaissance understanding of chemistry and material science. Elena's examination of the botanical specimens preserved within the manuscript's binding revealed genetic sequences that appeared to be artificial constructs rather than natural evolutionary products. The DNA analysis showed evidence of deliberate manipulation and engineering at the molecular level, with gene expression patterns optimized for functions that served no apparent biological purpose. These findings suggested that the plants depicted in Aldrovandi's illustrations had been specifically designed to support the nutritional and environmental needs of the extraordinary creatures under his care. The architectural plans embedded in the manuscript's later pages revealed engineering principles that predated their supposed invention by centuries. Environmental control systems that wouldn't be developed until the mid-20th century, electromagnetic shielding techniques that required understanding of physics principles not discovered until the modern era, and materials science applications that pushed the boundaries of current technological capabilities. The level of sophistication suggested that Aldrovandi had received technical guidance from sources with access to knowledge far beyond his historical period. Elena's research into the geographical locations mentioned in the manuscript led her to sites throughout Europe where unusual archaeological evidence suggested the presence of structures that didn't match conventional historical timelines. Ground-penetrating radar revealed underground complexes beneath medieval foundations, with architectural features that incorporated advanced engineering principles and construction techniques that shouldn't have existed during the periods of their supposed creation. The pattern of systematic destruction that had eliminated Aldrovandi specimens appeared to have continued throughout subsequent centuries. Elena documented similar campaigns of suppression and elimination that had targeted researchers and discoveries that challenged established understanding of natural history. Each instance followed a consistent pattern. Initial containment of the discovery, discrediting of the researchers involved, destruction of physical evidence, and systematic elimination of any documentation that might allow future reconstruction of the suppressed knowledge. The global scope of these suppression efforts suggested coordination between institutions across national and cultural boundaries. Elena's investigation revealed evidence of cooperation between religious authorities, academic institutions, government agencies, and private organizations that transcended the political conflicts and ideological differences that had shaped conventional history. This meta-institutional network appeared to operate according to principles and objectives that remained consistent across centuries of social and political transformation. Elena's attempts to trace the modern descendants of Aldrovandi's custodians led her into a labyrinth of secret societies, esoteric organizations, and academic networks that operated in the shadows of conventional institutions. These groups appeared to maintain the dual mission of preserving dangerous knowledge while preventing its premature disclosure, serving as both protectors and gatekeepers of information deemed too significant for unrestricted access. The manuscript's encoded sections revealed instructions for recognizing and establishing contact with surviving populations of the documented creatures. Aldrovandi's notes described specific protocols for approach, communication methods that transcended conventional language barriers, and behavioral indicators that could distinguish between genuinely peaceful intentions and potential threats. The existence of such detailed contact procedures suggested that the possibility of re-establishing relationships with these beings had been anticipated and planned for across the centuries. Elena discovered that several of the communication methods described in the manuscript were still being practiced by indigenous cultures in remote regions of the world. Shamanic traditions, mystical practices, and folk customs preserved in isolated communities contained elements that exactly matched Aldrovandi's documented techniques for establishing contact with non-human intelligences. These cultural continuities suggested that knowledge of the extraordinary creatures had been preserved through alternative channels even after their official suppression and elimination. The behavioral observations recorded in the manuscript revealed that the documented creatures possessed not only advanced intelligence, but also sophisticated understanding of human psychology and social dynamics. Aldrovandi's notes describe their ability to manipulate human perception and memory, influence emotional states through unknown mechanisms, and coordinate their concealment efforts through forms of communication that operated below the threshold of human awareness. These capabilities explained how populations might have survived the systematic destruction campaigns while remaining undetected by conventional observation methods. Elena's investigation into historical accounts of unexplained phenomena revealed numerous reports that matched the characteristics of creatures described in Aldrovandi's manuscript. Sightings of unusual beings, encounters with entities displaying impossible capabilities, and interactions with intelligences that seemed to exist outside conventional biological categories appeared throughout historical records from across the globe. The consistency of these reports across different cultures and time periods suggested that the creatures documented by Aldrovandi represented only a small sample of much larger populations. The manuscript's preservation techniques had incorporated methods for protecting not just the physical document, but also the consciousness and memories of those who studied it. Elena discovered that prolonged exposure to the manuscript triggered cognitive changes that enhanced pattern recognition, expanded sensory perception, and facilitated forms of understanding that operated outside conventional analytical frameworks. These effects appeared to be cumulative and permanent, suggesting that the document itself served as a tool for preparing human consciousness to process and utilize the knowledge it contained. Elena's analysis of the institutional responses to her research revealed the existence of monitoring systems that operated with unprecedented sophistication and reach. Her communications were being intercepted, her movements tracked, and her associates investigated through methods that suggested access to surveillance capabilities beyond those officially acknowledged by any government agency. The coordination between different monitoring organizations indicated a level of institutional cooperation that transcended normal jurisdictional boundaries and accountability structures. The financial networks that supported the suppression efforts appeared to operate through a complex web of foundations, trusts, and corporate entities that masked their true sources and objectives. Elena traced funding streams that connected academic institutions, religious organizations, government agencies, and private research facilities in patterns that revealed a coordinated effort to control information flow and research direction across multiple fields of study. The resources devoted to these suppression efforts indicated institutional commitment at the highest levels of social and political organization. Elena's investigation into the psychological profiles of researchers who had previously encountered similar phenomena revealed consistent patterns of institutional retaliation followed by professional isolation and personal destabilization. The methods used to discredit and neutralize threatening research appeared to have been refined over centuries of practice, with techniques adapted to exploit the specific vulnerabilities of academic culture and scientific methodology. The systematic nature of these responses suggested advanced preparation and institutional memory that transcended individual careers and organizational changes. The manuscript's encoded warnings described the consequences of premature disclosure of the documented knowledge. Aldrovandi had recorded detailed predictions about social upheaval, institutional collapse, and psychological trauma that would result from sudden revelation of the true nature and extent of non-human intelligence. His notes emphasized the necessity of careful preparation, gradual disclosure, and institutional support for processing information that challenge fundamental assumptions about human uniqueness and planetary dominance. Elena realized that her role in preserving and eventually disclosing the manuscript's contents placed her at the center of a conflict that extended far beyond academic disagreement or institutional politics. The knowledge contained in Aldrovandi's documentation represented a fundamental challenge to the foundational assumptions of human civilization, threatening to destabilize social structures, religious beliefs, and political systems that have been built on the presumption of human supremacy and isolation. The manuscript's survival strategy had incorporated predictions about the timing of its eventual disclosure. Aldrovandi's notes describe specific historical conditions that would indicate readiness for revelation. Global communication networks that could facilitate rapid information sharing, scientific methodologies capable of verifying extraordinary claims, and social conditions that might support fundamental paradigm shifts in human understanding. Elena recognized that the current historical moment matched these predicted conditions with remarkable precision. The contemporary relevance of the manuscript's contents extended beyond historical curiosity to address urgent questions about biodiversity, consciousness, and the future of planetary life. The documented creatures had possessed capabilities for environmental management, sustainable resource utilization, and harmonious coexistence that offered potential solutions to current ecological crises. Their systematic elimination had deprived humanity of knowledge and partnerships that might have prevented or mitigated the environmental destruction that threatened planetary stability. Elena's research revealed that the suppression of Aldrovandi's work represented only one component of a much broader pattern of knowledge management that had shaped human development across millennia. Advanced technologies, scientific breakthroughs, and philosophical insights have been systematically suppressed whenever they threatened to disrupt established power structures or challenge fundamental assumptions about the nature of reality. The manuscript provided evidence for institutional capabilities and coordination that operated across centuries to maintain controlled evolution of human knowledge and capability. The global network responsible for suppressing dangerous knowledge appeared to be experiencing internal conflicts and organizational stress that created opportunities for disclosure that hadn't existed in previous eras. Elena's investigation revealed evidence of factional disputes, competing methodologies, and philosophical disagreements within the suppression apparatus that suggested weakening coordination and reduced effectiveness. The manuscript's emergence at this particular historical moment appeared to be the result of deliberate timing rather than mere chance. Elena understood that her work with Aldrovandi's manuscript had transformed her from a historical researcher into an active participant in a multi-generational struggle over the control and disclosure of fundamental knowledge about the nature of life and consciousness. The choices she made about how to preserve, interpret, and eventually reveal the manuscript contents would influence the trajectory of human understanding and the possibility of re-establishing contact with the extraordinary beings whose existence have been systematically denied and suppressed. The manuscript stood as both historical document and contemporary challenge, offering unprecedented insights into forms of life and consciousness that had once shared the earth with humanity, while demanding careful consideration of the consequences of revealing knowledge that institutional authorities had deemed too dangerous for unrestricted access. Elena's guardianship of this extraordinary legacy required balancing the imperative for truth and disclosure against the responsibility for preventing social disruption and ensuring that revelation served the advancement of human understanding rather than its destruction. The weight of Elena's responsibility became increasingly apparent as she discovered that the manuscript contained more than just historical documentation. It served as an active communication device that connected her with surviving networks of both human and non-human intelligences. The cryptographic layers she had been decoding were not merely protective measures, but operational protocols that activated dormant communication channels when properly interpreted. Her progress through the manuscript's hidden layers had been sending signals to recipients who had been waiting centuries for indication that the preserved knowledge had found a worthy guardian. Elena's first direct contact came through subtle alterations to her research environment that initially seemed like coincidence or oversight. Books would be left open to specific pages in the library. Research materials would be arranged in patterns that highlighted particular connections, and archival documents would be misfiled in ways that led her to discover corroborating evidence. These interventions became more sophisticated as her understanding of the manuscript deepened, evolving into complex information exchanges that operated through manipulation of her research discoveries and academic encounters. The realization that she was being actively guided by unseen intelligences forced Elena to reconsider everything she thought she understood about the nature of historical research and academic discovery. The manuscript was not merely a passive record of past events, but an active tool for establishing communication with entities that had been monitoring human development and waiting for the appropriate moment to re-establish contact. Her role as researcher had evolved into that of intermediary between human civilization and intelligences that operated according to principles and objectives that transcended conventional understanding. Elena's analysis of the patterns in her guided discoveries revealed that the surviving creatures documented by Aldrovandi had not merely hidden from human detection, but had actively participated in shaping human development from concealed positions. Their influence could be traced through historical events, scientific discoveries, and cultural developments that had guided human civilization toward greater understanding and capability, while preventing developments that might have led to premature contact or social disruption. The manuscript's later sections contained detailed instructions for establishing more direct communication with these hidden populations. Aldrovandi had documented specific locations, temporal patterns, and behavioral protocols that could facilitate controlled contact under appropriate circumstances. These instructions had been encoded with multiple layers of protection to ensure that only individuals with proper preparation and institutional support could access the information necessary for safe interaction. Elena's attempts to follow the contact protocols led her to remote locations throughout Europe, where archaeological evidence suggested ongoing activity by non-human intelligences. These sites showed signs of continuous maintenance and modification that extended far beyond their supposed abandonment centuries earlier. The engineering principles evident in their construction and upkeep demonstrated technological capabilities that exceeded current human understanding while remaining carefully concealed from casual observation. The first successful contact occurred at a site beneath the monastery of San Vitale that Aldrovandi had specifically mentioned in his notes. Elena's careful adherence to the documented protocols resulted in access to underground facilities that had been continuously operated and maintained for over 4 centuries. The beings she encountered there matched Aldrovandi's descriptions with remarkable accuracy, demonstrating that his documentation had been based on sustained and detailed observation rather than speculative imagination. The entities Elena met defied easy categorization within conventional biological frameworks. Their appearance incorporated features that seemed to shift and adapt according to environmental conditions and interaction requirements, suggesting biological systems that operated according to principles unknown to human science. Their communication methods transcended spoken language, operating through direct transfer of concepts and information that bypassed conventional sensory channels, while conveying meaning with unprecedented precision and depth. Elena learned that these beings had been actively involved in preserving and protecting human civilization through periods of potential self-destruction. Their interventions have been carefully calibrated to prevent catastrophic outcomes, while allowing human development to proceed according to natural patterns of growth and discovery. The systematic suppression of knowledge about their existence had been implemented with their cooperation as a necessary measure for maintaining social stability during humanity's developmental phases. The revealed purpose of the centuries-long concealment was to allow human civilization to develop sufficient maturity and capability to engage in productive partnership rather than fearful subjugation or exploitative domination. The beings had been monitoring human progress toward ethical development, technological responsibility, and ecological awareness that would indicate readiness for open contact and collaboration. Elena discovered that current global challenges had accelerated the timeline for revelation and contact. Environmental destruction, social fragmentation, and technological development had reached critical thresholds that required intervention to prevent outcomes that would eliminate possibilities for future partnership. The manuscript's emergence and her successful navigation of its protective protocols had been timed to coincide with this period of necessary disclosure and active cooperation. The beings revealed that similar contact protocols were being activated simultaneously around the world, with other researchers and institutions receiving guidance toward discoveries that would prepare human civilization for gradual revelation of the hidden diversity of planetary intelligence. Elena's work represented one component of a coordinated disclosure process that had been planned and prepared for across centuries of careful observation and preparation. Elena learned that the technological capabilities she had observed in the hidden facilities represented only a small fraction of the knowledge and capabilities that had been developed through millennia of concealed advancement. The beings had continued their evolution and development while maintaining their protective concealment, achieving levels of understanding and capability that offered solutions to virtually every challenge facing human civilization. The collaborative potential revealed through Elena's contacts suggested possibilities for addressing climate change, resource scarcity, social inequality, and technological risks through partnership with intelligences that had successfully solved similar challenges in their own development. However, successful collaboration would require fundamental shifts in human attitudes toward consciousness, intelligence, and the nature of planetary citizenship that challenged core assumptions of contemporary culture. Elena's role evolved from researcher to translator and diplomat as she worked to facilitate understanding between human institutions and the concealed intelligences seeking to establish productive relationships. The process required careful navigation of institutional resistance, public skepticism, and the psychological challenges of accepting the existence of forms of intelligence and capability that exceeded human understanding and achievement. The manuscript's final sections revealed that Elena's successful contact marked the beginning of a transition period during which human civilization would gradually be introduced to the true complexity and diversity of planetary intelligence. This process would require careful management to prevent social disruption while facilitating the paradigm shifts necessary for productive integration with a broader community of conscious beings. Elena understood that her discovery and disclosure of Aldrovandi's manuscript represented more than just historical revelation. It marked humanity's graduation from protected isolation to active participation in a planetary community that had been maintaining careful watch over their development. The responsibility for managing this transition successfully would determine whether human civilization would thrive as a collaborative partner or struggle with the psychological and social challenges of acknowledging their position within a larger framework of intelligence and capability. The beings emphasized that successful transition would require human institutions to develop new frameworks for understanding consciousness, intelligence, and the nature of life itself. The anthropocentric assumptions that had shaped human development would need to evolve toward more inclusive models that recognize the validity and value of different forms of consciousness and biological organization. Elena's ongoing work involved establishing communication protocols between human academic institutions and the concealed intelligences, developing verification methods for claims that exceeded conventional understanding, and creating educational frameworks that could facilitate public acceptance of expanded knowledge about planetary diversity. The process required careful coordination between revelation and preparation to ensure that disclosure served constructive rather than disruptive purposes. The implications of successful contact extended far beyond academic curiosity to encompass fundamental questions about the future direction of human development. Partnership with beings who had achieved sustainable relationships with planetary ecosystems, developed technologies that operated in harmony with natural systems, and evolved social structures that balanced individual autonomy with collective responsibility offered opportunities for addressing the challenges that threatened human civilization's long-term survival. Elena realized that her guardianship of Aldrovandi's manuscript had prepared her for a role she could never have anticipated when she first opened the ancient parchment in the Bologna archives. The document had served as both historical record and recruitment tool, identifying and preparing individuals capable of facilitating humanity's transition from isolation to integration within the broader community of planetary intelligence. The success of this transition would depend on humanity's ability to transcend the fear, prejudice, and institutional inertia that had maintained the centuries-long suppression of knowledge about non-human intelligence. Elena's work demonstrated that such transcendence was possible, but would require sustained effort and institutional courage to overcome the resistance of those who preferred the comfort of familiar limitations to the challenges of expanded understanding and unprecedented possibilities. The manuscript's preservation through centuries of systematic suppression had ensured that knowledge of the concealed intelligences would survive until humanity developed sufficient maturity to engage productively with revelation and contact. Elena's successful navigation of its protective protocols marked the beginning of a new chapter in human development, one that would be characterized by collaboration rather than isolation, partnership rather than dominance, and recognition of humanity's place within the magnificent diversity of consciousness and intelligence that had always shared their planetary home.